All right, this is probably the easiest way to do an R3D trim from Premiere if you're using the native R3D clips. You can see here using the R3D. For this test, what I did, to reveal in Finder, I just to test to show that this works, I picked R3D clips that have spanned clips on them. So these ones here, even though it shows up as one clip in the project, after bringing it into the media browser, on disk they're spanned over 3 clips because they're 4 gigs each. So what I did is I made a little test edit here of these 2 clips. This first clip is just a little piece of the slate clip. And then CO2, which is a spanned clip, I took a little bit from the beginning of the clip span, and then I edited another clip from the end of the clip span just to make sure that this works, because just to see if the trimming software works, and it did. But that's the reason why it looks like that. Okay, so I've got the R3D clips. So this involves a Premiere extension called PlumePack Premium. It's a paid app, well, a paid extension, and I bought it, so I can give you the serial number for it. Then let me show you how this works. So you got the sequence, active sequence here. So if you want to losslessly trim these clips, obviously set the media process mode to trim. Handles, if you're fairly certain that this is locked cut, 24 frames is good. Obviously change that to at your discretion. I like to have this thing enabled, add in and out to trim the file names. And this will literally, you can see if you hover over each thing, it'll tell you what it's going to do. So it'll add the frame number to each trimmed piece, so you can kind of figure out where it came from in the original clip, which is kind of nice. In this case, there's no audio, and if you're sending this to me for color, I don't want audio, so you turn off audio. Advanced trim settings, I think these are the defaults, and you can just leave them as is for the most part. And the filter, enable unused items, remove the unused items. Keep only chosen sequences and depths dependencies. So if you've got nested sequences, it'll dig into the nested sequences and properly trim those clips as well. Here's where you choose the sequence or sequences you want to, as it says, consolidate. And it's nice. It says nested sequence will be taken into account. So in this case, there's only one sequence, so I've just selected that. This only applies if you've got dynamic link After Effects comps in the timeline, so probably doesn't matter here. These ones here you probably want to have checked as well. Okay, and the bottom here for transform, this is how it's going to write the trim folder to the destination folder. So what I like to do is have original folder structure on disk. So it's going to mirror the original path to the files. Like in this case, you can see this is the path to the original clips here. When it trims this clip and writes it to a new folder, it'll actually preserve the hierarchy of folder names here in the destination folder, which I like to have just as a way to easily backtrack if something goes wrong or whatever. I have that reference as to where it came from originally, what original clip it came from. So enabled original folder structure and disk. Give each media a unique file name. I turn this on. I think for color, when I'm just going to deliver to you final colored files, I think this probably doesn't matter. So in this case, enable that. Definitely turn this off though. I definitely don't like that. If you have that on, it's going to rename the clip based on how you renamed it in the project. This is I don't think this. You might as well turn this on. It's basically going to create, if it trims multiple parts of a single clip, it's going to write all those parts to a single bin, which actually is useful. So enable that. Place all media into root subfolder. That's fine. You can just leave it like that. You can just leave that as well. You can obviously rename the folder that it writes all the trim files to, but in this case, I don't really care. And then import final PlumePack report into the project. That's actually pretty useful, and you'll see how that works. So in this case, we'll click Analyze Project. And you scroll down here, it'll tell you how much disk space it would have used if you didn't trim it and collected it. And this is what it looks like afterwards. So if everything looks good, and then it's really neat because it actually does give you a really detailed list of what it's going to do and where it's going to write. You can see there. It's going to create a file called this. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so now if everything looks good, all you got to do is click this thing that says PlumePack it. It'll ask you where you want to write both. So it'll create a new Premiere project file. So I'm going to write it to a folder called, I'll just call it trim sources. Okay, and then just write it there. And so it's going to write the new project file as well as the trimmed media to that folder. And it does everything it needs to do to relink everything back. So you can see there's this new project here called R3D Project PlumePack. Let's open that. And so you can see here now in this PlumePack media file folder, there's all the trimmed media. So for the R3D files, it actually preserves the, you can see here for these CO2 clips, it created subfolders for each trim, but it saved the frame number for each section that it trimmed. You can see here it says PP001. That's because we enabled this give each media a unique file name. If that was turned off, it would create the file with the same name as this one up here. It'll give it the same file name, but it doesn't collide because they're in subfolders. If I'm going to send this to Resolve or something, I probably don't want that to be the same name because that just a little more headaches when I'm conforming back into Resolve. So that's why it's good to have this option, unique file name, enabled. So I at least know what is the proper clip when I send it to Resolve. Okay, so I'm going to open this up, and let's see, this is our project here. So I'm going to rename the sequence trimmed. Okay, so here's a clip. Here, now let me open up so I'm going to open up the original project that we trimmed from this one here. And then I'm going to color these clips just so we know the difference here. So that's just the original sequence. And let me just collapse these clips down to V1. So what I'll do is, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project. And I'm going to drag both of those sequences into the project just so we can compare the two. Trim compare. Okay, so I'll create this new project called trim compare, and I'm going to copy. In fact, let me do this. So I'll create a bin in the original project called, how about this? I'll just drag it into this folder called original. And I'll just drag the sequence, the original sequence, into the new project. Then all the source clips come along with it, and then we'll go to the trimmed version. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the trimmed. This is the trimmed project. And then go to the original project here. Then drag the original sequence in there. So now we got the original sequence. Let's close this. Okay. All right, here's the original sequence. Close this one here too. And then the trimmed clips. So what I'll do is copy this and paste it over the original. And then I'll drop the trim clips into difference mode so we can see if everything conformed properly. And check our time code up here too. And it looks like everything trimmed properly, which is cool. Set that back to normal. And just to be sure, I'm going to reveal in Finder the trimmed clip just to make sure that it's referencing the PlumePack trimmed media there. And you can see it is. So it looks like we're all good there. So you can see here for that AO1CO2 clip that was spanned, we can see that it's trimming from the right part of the clip. And so you see it writes this PlumePack reports text file, and it gives you a really detailed listing of everything it did. And there's some caveats to trimming. So if you click on the documentation tab in the PlumePack extension, if you find this link here, limitations here, and it'll tell you, in fact, here's Here's the link to that. And it gives you a big, long list and explanation of the types of clips that won't get trimmed because for whatever reason, there are limitations in which the trimming will not work. So there's a lot of caveats. But for the most part, normal clips, anything that's kind of a straight cut thing, trims pretty well. But obviously, if you use things like time remap clips, reversals or keyframes, stuff like that. So take a look at this in case. What will happen is that if it figures out that it's one of these kind of clips, it just doesn't trim it. It'll copy the entire clip in its entirety instead of trimming it. So at least it conforms without any errors. So if you're wondering why some clips sometimes will trim in its entirety, that's the reason why. Warp stabilizer is one big caveat with using trimming with any system, not just this extension. It's because stabilizer analyzes the whole clip, and if you trim the ends off of it, even though the same frames are visible in the timeline, the warp stabilizer, as far as it's concerned, it's a different clip, and so stabilization may go wacky. So in this case, you need to make sure that you go to any clip that has warp stabilizer and reanalyze the clip. Otherwise, it's going to be off. So take a read, just read through this stuff and just be aware of some of the issues that may come up when you trim media. For the most part, this works, and it's this is the easiest way to do it in Premiere without having to send things out to Resolve, which can also do lossless trimming of all the stuff, but it's a lot more involved. So for now, this works really well.